Patriots, 2001 to 2018. No dynasty in NFL history burned longer or brighter than the New England Patriots, but even legends collapse under their own weight. For nearly 2 decades, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick redefined dominance, surviving scandals, rebuilding rosters, and winning 6 Super Bowls in the process. Yet beneath the surface, friction grew. Brady wanted more say, Belichick wanted control, and owner Robert Kraft played referee in a silent power struggle. The TB12 method clashed with team trainers. Belichick's cold pragmatism, cutting veterans without sentiment, eventually targeted Brady himself. The trust fractured. In 2019, the offense sputtered, and their playoff loss to Tennessee felt like the end of an empire. Brady walked to Tampa Bay, Belichick stayed behind, and for the first time, they both looked human. One proved he could win without the other is still searching for life after greatness. The Patriots didn't implode, they eroded, slowly, quietly, like a kingdom that forgot what made it special in the first place. Chiefs, 2018 to present. The Kansas City Chiefs are still the measuring stick of the NFL, but even dynasties that seem untouchable eventually start to wobble. Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid built an era defined by creativity, fireworks, and rings. But every empire hits a moment where the cracks finally show. You could argue that moment came last year, when Kansas City lost the Super Bowl to the Eagles in embarrassing fashion. The defeat wasn't just about one game, it exposed how much the team's dominance had slipped. The offense looked predictable, the defense broke under pressure, and for the first time in years, the Chiefs looked mortal. Then came this season's start. 2 straight losses, something that hasn't happened in the Mahomes era. Suddenly, the unstoppable machine looked vulnerable. Losing stars like Tyreek Hill and key coordinators has finally caught up with them. And even Mahomes can't patch every hole. They're still great, but that aura of invincibility, it's fading fast. And if history repeats, this might be the first real sign the dynasty's decline has already begun. 49ers, 1981 to 1994. The San Francisco 49ers mastered perfection under Bill Walsh's genius. But genius doesn't last forever. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, and Steve Young made the West Coast offense unstoppable, blending precision and poise like no team before them. But behind all that polish, fractures formed. Walsh's retirement left a leadership void. Montana's injuries opened the door for Young, sparking one of the NFL's most famous quarterback controversies. The locker room split between loyalty and talent. As Young rose, the old guard faded. The dynasty's discipline gave way to pressure and politics. Even when Young finally got his Super Bowl in 1994, it felt like a last stand, brilliant but fleeting. The NFL had caught up to the West Coast blueprint, adapting and evolving faster than San Francisco could reinvent it. Walsh's influence faded, and the 49ers went from innovators to imitators. Every empire runs out of ideas eventually, and for the Niners, that brilliance burned out just as quickly as it began. Cowboys, 1991 to 1995. The Cowboys of the 1990s were an unstoppable machine, until ego broke every gear. Jimmy Johnson built a juggernaut from the ruins, drafting Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and Troy Aikman into football royalty. They were fast, tough, and unstoppable, but success bred arrogance. Owner Jerry Jones wanted credit for building the empire, while Johnson wanted control of his creation. The clash became inevitable. Johnson left after back-to-back Super Bowl wins, replaced by Barry Switzer, a coach who inherited greatness but couldn't maintain it. The talent carried Dallas to one more title in 1995, but the chemistry was gone. Off-field controversies piled up, players aged, and the front office splintered. By the late 90s, the Cowboys were still famous but no longer feared. The dynasty didn't die from losses, it died from pride. What began as unity turned into civil war, and no amount of rings could repair what ego destroyed. Steelers, 1972 to 1979. The Steelers of the 1970s were built on toughness, but even steel rusts with time. Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, and the Steel Curtain defense turned Pittsburgh into football's gold standard. 4 Super Bowls in 6 years made them immortal. But every empire pays a toll. By the late 70s, injuries piled up, stars aged, and the chemistry that defined them began to fracture. Bradshaw's arm surgeries slowed him down, the defense lost its bite, and the locker room unity that carried them started to fade. The front office held on too long, believing the past could carry the future. But by the early 80s, the Steelers were ordinary again. The NFL had changed, speed replaced smash mouth, and dynasties moved to San Francisco. Pittsburgh's fall wasn't dramatic. It was gradual. Legends retired, the magic evaporated, and the steel curtain finally came down. But first, only cool people are subscribed to this channel, so hit that subscribe button before we go any further. Raiders, 1967 to 1985. The Raiders were chaos wrapped in silver and black, and that chaos eventually consumed them. Under Al Davis, they lived by just win, baby. And for nearly 2 decades, they did. They thrived on rebellion, outcasts, tough guys, and misfits who scared opponents before the whistle even blew. But the same defiance that made them great also made them unstable. Player feuds, constant coaching turnover, and Davis's controlling hand created internal battles no opponent could match. After their 1983 Super Bowl win, the talent pool dried up. Davis refused to adapt to the new NFL, clinging to deep bombs and brute force while the league evolved around him. The move to Los Angeles only deepened the cracks, bringing distractions and lawsuits that sapped the team's identity. By the mid-80s, the swagger was gone. The Raiders were still loud, still brash, but no longer feared. The rebellion that built them had finally turned inward. Packers, 1960 to 1967. The Green Bay Packers of the 1960s were football's first true dynasty, but even Lombardi's perfection had an expiration date. Vince Lombardi's discipline and leadership turned a small-town team into a national powerhouse, winning 5 championships in 7 years. His players followed him with military precision until the weight of greatness became too much. By the late 60s, fatigue had set in. Lombardi's demanding style wore down his stars, and his departure in 1968 left a void no one could fill. Bart Starr aged, the power sweep lost its edge, and Green Bay's once pristine system started to crack. The roster that once dominated became bloated with veterans past their peak. The franchise went from unstoppable to invisible, sinking into mediocrity throughout the 70s. The dynasty didn't end in one collapse. It faded piece by piece as time caught up and Lombardi's iron will was no longer there to hold it together. Dolphins, 1970 to 1974. The Miami Dolphins reached football perfection and learned that perfection can't be repeated. Don Shula built a flawless machine, winning back-to-back titles and delivering the NFL's only perfect season in 1972. But sustaining perfection is impossible. Quarterback Bob Grease got older, the running game slowed, and opponents studied every inch of Shula's schemes. By 1975, the team's dominance slipped as rivals like Pittsburgh rose to power. The no-name defense couldn't hide its age, and Shula's system, once innovative, became predictable. The locker room stayed disciplined, but the fire that fueled their run was gone. Injuries mounted, and the hunger that drove their perfect season was replaced by expectation. The Dolphins didn't implode. They exhausted themselves chasing an impossible standard. Every team since has chased their ghost, but the Dolphins learned firsthand. Once you reach perfection, the only direction left to go is down. Colts, 1958 to 1971. The Baltimore Colts were the NFL's early blueprint for greatness and for heartbreak. Johnny Unitas, Raymond Berry, and Weeb Ewbank turned Baltimore into a dynasty built on precision and grit. The greatest game ever played in 1958 made them legends, but the same pressure that made them icons slowly crushed them. As Unitas aged and injuries piled up, the offense lost its rhythm. Coaching changes fractured continuity. The shocking loss to the Jets in Super Bowl III was a turning point, an upset so humiliating it changed football's balance of power forever. Don Shula's team stayed strong through the late 60s, but inconsistency and internal tension chipped away at their dominance. When they finally won another title in 1970, it felt more like redemption than resurgence. 1 year later, the magic was gone. The team that made America fall in love with football had fallen victim to the same fate as every dynasty before them: time, change, and the cruel reality of transition. Cowboys, 1970 to 1979. The Cowboys of the 70s built the myth of America's team, but by the end of the decade, that myth began to unravel. Tom Landry's stoic brilliance kept Dallas balanced through constant evolution, but no formula lasts forever. Roger Staubach aged, the doomsday defense lost its teeth, and internal battles began to stir. The Cowboys' success created enormous expectations, and every playoff loss cut deeper. By 1980, their aura of invincibility faded, replaced by questions about whether Landry's methods were outdated. Younger teams, faster, more aggressive, started passing them by. The Cowboys were still contenders, but the spark that defined their glory years flickered out. They went from innovators to imitators, trying to chase what they once dictated. The star on the helmet still shined, but the dynasty behind it had dimmed. And what came next would shock everyone, because their next era of dominance would implode in even more dramatic fashion. Rams, 1999 to 2001. Few dynasties burned brighter or vanished faster than the St. Louis Rams. Dubbed the greatest show on turf, they revolutionized football with speed, precision, and Kurt Warner's Cinderella story. For 3 seasons, they were unstoppable, lighting up scoreboards with Warner, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, and Torrey Holt at the controls. But behind all that brilliance, cracks were forming. Warner took constant hits behind a shaky offensive line, and defenses eventually figured out how to disrupt their timing. After their shocking Super Bowl loss to the Patriots, the magic unraveled. Injuries piled up, egos clashed, and Mike Martz's pass-heavy offense was exposed as one-dimensional once Faulk's dominance waned. Warner's rise turned into a fall as he battled turnovers and benchings, while the locker room fractured between old stars and new faces. Within 2 years, the Rams went from innovators to imitators, from unstoppable to irrelevant. The dynasty didn't fade, it crashed fast and loud, leaving fans wondering how something that brilliant could disappear overnight. Redskins, 1982 to 1991. Washington's dynasty was built on depth and discipline, but like many great teams, it collapsed under complacency. Joe Gibbs crafted 3 championship rosters with 3 different quarterbacks, an unheard of feat that showcased his system's brilliance. But the league evolved, and Washington didn't. The Hogs aged, the defense slowed, and the franchise lost its identity when Gibbs retired after the 1992 season. Free agency gutted their roster, and poor drafting sealed their downfall. Suddenly, the team that defined toughness became a revolving door of coaches, owners, and mediocrity. Doug Williams' historic Super Bowl win faded into trivia, and by the late 90s, the organization was unrecognizable. Once a model of balance, Washington turned chaotic and cash-driven, chasing quick fixes instead of stability. Their fall wasn't a crash, it was decay, the slow unraveling of everything Gibbs built. If you like this video, consider watching this next one, which YouTube thinks you are going to really love.